I'm going to put myself on camera for those who are online just for a moment, just to say I am actually here, but for the rest of the session, I'll probably be out of camera shot, so I won't obscure the distinguished panelists I've got here. For those who are not familiar with myself, my name is Marek Suchocki. I'm part of the buildingSMART International Infrastructure Steering Committee, and I chair the Project Steering Committee. I'm also very proud to be a Chartered Fellow of the Institution of Civil Engineers, as well as Fellow of the Chartered Institution of Civil Engineering Surveyors, and have a deep experience for over 30 years working in digital for the civil engineering sector, which I think we're at a fantastic, maybe I won't call it a tipping point, but an opportunity point to truly digitize our industry and move it to a new paradigm. We've always been very good at managing our assets using traditional techniques. We were probably the most advanced in 3D when I was a student in the 80s. Products like MX, they were there. The companies we would visit, the engineering businesses had better equipment than universities because they were running this advanced software. And then I think I felt over the last sort of 25 or more years, we've fallen behind many other industry spaces. But perhaps today is a good time to look at the future and what we can do. So that's enough about myself. I'm going to pass on to my panel. I'll start with Jan just to give a brief introduction about himself, and then if you pass the mic forward.
Jan Christian Thoren. I work at the Swedish Transportation Administration. We consist of both road and railways, and I work as a technical director in one of the major projects, and I have an experience in both the design and the production of major projects in the last 20 years. And I've also been working with the IFC tunnel as a domain expert for the tunnel 4.4 version since the beginning of that project.
Good morning. Good morning, Mike Bousliman. I'm the CIO at Montana Department of Transportation, so I run our IT department. And I'm here as representing AASHTO as the chair of the Committee on Joint Standardization, which is, if you were in Will's session earlier, a little bit of an overview. I'm going to talk about it at 1:30 today in more detail, but effectively the committee that is overseeing the implementation and move forward of implementing various standards such as IFC. So thank you for having me.
My name's George Lukes. I'm from the Utah Department of Transportation. I'm the design and standards engineer. I've been leading our digital delivery and digital twin effort for about the last 7 or 8 years.
Good morning. My name is Mike Kennerly. I am the director of the Design Bureau for the Iowa Department of Transportation, and I'm also here as a representative of AASHTO. I chair the Joint Technical Committee on Electronic Engineering Standards, and we'll refer to it this morning as well, and we'll be talking about it in a little bit more detail this afternoon.
Fantastic, gentlemen. The way we're going to run the panel session is I'm going to kind of randomly ask questions to individuals, but first off, could I just ask, you've got the microphone, Michael, what are your expectations from joining and attending the buildingSMART Summit here in Montreal?
You know, my expectations are rather simple: to learn. You know, there's a lot that we're trying to grasp as state transportation organizations in regard to what IFC means and how to apply it. You know, this is really our first opportunity to participate, you know, in one of the international summits. And so really, you know, in terms of my expectations, is just to get a better understanding, you know, of where IFC is and how it's being applied. And then conversely, how we then can apply that to what's going on in the US. Thank you.
Could you pass the mic too? Because Mike, you know, again, you've got deep involvement in AASHTO. Similarly, what do you see as your expectations from coming here and seeing the work that's been done through buildingSMART?
Similar to Mike, to learn. I'll be very upfront. I'm not the BIM expert in my organization. These three gentlemen here, I'm sure, can bring a lot more to the table. But I feel like things in the U.S. are a little bit behind where the rest of the world is, and trying to wrangle in 50 states and others to try to get on the same roadmap, same path. as well as working with all of our partners is a huge challenge. So the more I understand about what's worked in other countries and how we can better position AASHTO and the state DOTs in the US, the more effective our committee can be. And I think that's one of the expectations, is that we can help move these standards forward and get the US back where we feel we ought to be. And it's kind of happening organically now, DOT by DOT, but there's not a lot of real strong coordination at the AASHTO level. So that's something I hope to understand and bring to bear as my role of the chair.
Thank you. George, you say your role's in standards for Utah. Attending here, are you already fully up to speed with what's been done around IFC 4.3, or is this a learning opportunity as well for you to be here?
Definitely not fully up to speed, so it's a learning opportunity as well. I think it's really interesting. Yesterday, one of the things that I was hoping to hear was the live demo that was shown of how data was going. I think it was the door and the window and the part of the building, seeing how data was going from design to a digital twin, for lack of a better use of words. Those are the kind of things that I think we're working on right now, and that's the kind of information that's super helpful for us.
Thank you. And I think that is one of the great opportunities, that having these standards will allow us to have common formats to share into, whether it's smart cities, smart highways, digital twins, because we're not going to have to constantly translate. I want to turn to Jan now, because Trafikverket just last week put out a statement saying that you're going to demand IFC, and I know you're obviously an expert around the work, particularly in your involvement in 4.4 that you mentioned. For Trafikverket, do you see IFC 4.3 as a game changer, or is there something else that you
Absolutely. As an owner perspective, we have struggled during the last 20, 30 years with different type of deliveries and trying to be open to the market, saying that you can choose whatever you want, but we are still been working in locked-in scenarios, and we haven't had that. As I can imagine, many people see that we don't have that productivity change in our business for a very long time. It's very conservative, and I see that there is an opening for innovation and an opening of the market, because we will be more open to the different type of solutions that might be in both how to design, how to deliver design, how to do machine guiding, and everything that is connected to that. We have robots doing the rebar design or construction on site, and so I think that we need to open up the doors for innovation and open up the doors for the market to come with new solutions. So trying to be not stuck in conservative ways to do things is a way of us to open up the market for our suppliers.
So what I'm hearing you say there is that you're already seeing that the supply chain is leveraging innovative hardware, perhaps software tools, but maybe you as a client, you're still a bit kind of stuck in the old ways. Could you maybe expand on that and tell me about the type of systems you currently use for asset management and project control, but also what data requirements do you currently put on your suppliers for handover today, not moving forward?
Today, yes. We have a system for handover data from the projects to the design, to the maintenance, or to the what to call it, the use of the roads and railways. But the problem is that these are very strict, defined, and very much based on the platform that we're using. So we have a platform for using for bridge and tunnel management. They demand drawings in a certain way, in a certain type, and a certain scale, and everything is very fixed on this, because that's the end receiving system that has defined it and goes back into the design process and everything. But we see if we try to loosen up this, then we can have an IFC 5 coming in, then we much more flexible, can put in other type of information, we can use it in another way, or we are not so system dependent on our side either. We can use this information to maybe to several systems internally to feed data to different type of maintenance systems and asset management systems. Because I think also one of the problems that we had, for 12 years put together road and railway. So we have 2 generations of system coming in, and we are still not figured out how we're going to consolidate all this information. But I think IFC might help us in that way, because then we can start consolidating, because we have one way in. Then we can have we're free to choose on how to develop the asset management systems.
Yeah, I think that's a very good kind of point you've been making there, where historically we would have gone point to point to point deliverables, where IFC will at least cover a few more bases. It's not going to be the solution to everything, but it means that, yes, we can receive the IFC, and then that can be distributed. George, I'd like to turn to you actually, because what kind of data formats do the Utah currently specify? Do you give your suppliers DGN, IFC, Schaefer? What's the kind of things that typically go into the contracts for them to hand back to you?
So ours is a little bit different process. And what I mean specifically is, as a DOT or as a government agency, we can't afford to have several different platforms. So for design, we use Bentley as our platform. Some of our consultants want to use Autodesk. It's a struggle because it's a different platform. Our contractors use different platforms also. They use Trimble, Leica, Topcon, AgTech. That's a struggle. So essentially our process, like everyone else has always been, we create a paper plan set. And that paper plan set takes all the intelligence and all of the data out of it. So we've got a block right there, and we can't push data the way we'd like to. So what we've done is we have formed, I've heard a lot in this conference so far about collaboration. We've formed a lot of different committees with contractors, consultants, federal highways, vendors, and we've had the opportunity to figure out how to at least get files transferred to contractors so that they can build their models in Trimble Business Center. But if we have open data standards, and we can literally publish a file that a contractor can just open up and have the design intent, it's unbelievable how much time that saves. Our contractors have told us we have about a 25-day advertising period. They said originally, this goes back to about 2016, it might take them between 2 and 5 days just to understand our naming conventions, our files, our point names, things of that nature. And then it takes them another 10 days just to take those files and puzzle them back together and put them into Trimble, Leica, Topcon, AgTech. So of the 25 days, they may be using 19 or 20 days just to get a model ready, and now they've only got 4 days to work with it. Over the course of the last, like I said, 6 or 7 years, we've gotten to the point with contractors, they've let us know they can now, based on what we give them, it takes them a day or 2 to get their model put back together. Now they can do things like phasing. They can do a whole bunch of other stuff, which makes the bids more competitive, which helps us as well.
A great illustration of the actual challenge that the supply chain also faces. And I know from my personal experience when I worked for Atkins in the noughties that there were contracts where you had to get method statements from people down the food chain, and there was like -4 days to actually develop the method statement by the time it had gone from manager to person issuing and then receiving. And we've got to be sensitive to the imposition that goes on the suppliers.
Yeah, and even with those methods, it's not a perfect process, right?
Of course, yeah, no, exactly. So I think there's a lot to unpick here. And Michael Kay, I mean, you delivered a fantastic presentation yesterday, but from your experience, what is the challenge from the current types of data that get specified within DOTs to this kind of vision that you set from the AASHTO side?
I think there's a couple of different challenges, and George touched on a couple of them. I think one of the biggest challenges is that that idea that your customer is now using a different tool than they've ever used before, and being able to provide them with the information they need, the files they need, and the conversations that have to take place is a huge challenge. One of the things that we tried to do was meet with the industry early and often in order to understand what their needs were, what their file structure needs were, but then to be specific in terms of what we were going to provide them and how we were going to provide it to them. And working through that over, for us, the course of about 14 years, in terms of what we were going to provide and the files and all that. But I think one of the other real challenges here is the idea that, when it comes to what we talk about all the time, which is interoperability, there are still the tools that are lacking that we need in order to do this efficiently. We've made tremendous strides, but when you look at, the ideal of how does a contractor use a model in the field, which is a very practical question, but at the same time, where are the tools that they need and what's the capacity of those tools? And then how are we going to be able to, realistically leverage that information, in the field? And it's a real struggle, to get contractors to accept this, as a way of doing business when they've been using 2D plans, for the last who knows how long, and all of a sudden going to a model-based approach in an industry that's for profit, which means time is money, creates a number of real challenges for them. And trying to work through that with them has been a real challenge.
I really take your point there that you need to be sensitive to the capacity for the supply chain
Yes.
to embrace new ways of working. I mean, Jan gave a slightly different perspective, which is that the supply chains perhaps moved ahead of traffic Verkehr, but I think you're right that the mass, the long tail is very long, and we can't just shoot for the moon with great new standards and find that it unpacks itself.
Yeah, and that ideal of not shooting for the moon is critical. The ideal of taking this in steps and in pilots that allow your staff as the designers to get comfortable with these tools, but then also to allow the industry to get comfortable with these tools. And you're going to find that the industry is at different places. When we've worked with grading and paving contractors who use automated machine guidance, they've probably embraced this technology the fastest. And when all of a sudden you talk to bridge contractors who don't use automated machine guidance, now it's a different issue. And in terms of the value that they can get out of this and how they can use it. And it creates a real challenge for us as owners, and as agencies that are trying to advance this technology in terms of convincing them of its use case.
Yeah, and I think so this also, I want to turn to Mike B, because we're talking about the maturity of the supply chain, the readiness of the supply chain. So as CIO from Montana, how ready are you to receive brand new data forms, be they geospatial or IFC 4.3? What's the organizational technical maturity, but also the human and procedural maturity to kind of take on these new things and use it?
There's a lot of questions there. I'm going to try to.
Sorry, I wasn't trying to throw you under the bus.
One by one. I think these gentlemen did a good job of describing where we are. We're in a similar spot in Montana. Certainly the challenges are change and change management. We've hired a person whose sole expertise is change management, and her role is to help guide our organization on multiple fronts and do it in a mature way, instead of it becoming kind of an afterthought and realizing we just disrupted people's lives across the board. So that's one thing we focused on. Second, I'll talk a little bit about what I view as the balance between vendor lock and an open standard at the other end of the spectrum. On one hand, these tools are obviously very expensive, and we'd love to have every tool that every contractor, every consultant design engineer has and be able to deliver whatever it is they want in the format they want, but that's not reasonable. So the need to have open standards so that consultant design engineer A, B, and C all have the same ability to bid on a project, and same on the construction side. We can't move so fast that the contracting community and consultant design engineering community can't keep up with us. And then you compound that with some of the things Mike talked about. There's 50 states, and some of these contractors work from state to state to state. So we all have to be a little bit on the same page with the pace we move, But the open standards start to break down some of those barriers and make it a little more seamless to use whatever product we want, or Iowa wants, or Utah wants. And conversely, the vendor community in the same position. So I think I kind of answered your question. I'm trying to think of, there was one more.
I think the one that I'd like to hear is how ready are you from a technical and personnel capacity within the DOT for this? Because
Okay.
that to me might be a big step as well.
The technical aspect, we're very ready. We're in the process of implementing Autodesk and moving away from Bentley, and that's the big project going on right now. But in the midst of that is the 3D model and the BIM implementation and the experimental use of those capabilities as more proof of concept. So we're ready there. What we're discovering along the way is, from a data perspective, where's the authoritative source of data? Where's it stored? Where's it saved? How is it managed? From a legal perspective, from a historical perspective, we're not very ready. And until we understand where that data is going to reside and which product is going to be effectively the authoritative source for it, we have a fair amount of work to do. And then you throw in OpenBIM or GeoBIM and the geospatial component, and we've added another layer of complexity to all of that. So that's something we're diving into right now and getting more ready. But from a POC, proof of concept perspective, the tool sets we have, we're fairly ready to move ahead. There's a raft of other things we have to deal with before we're ready for a full production environment of a 3D model.
I'll come back to some of the points you made there about, the data you store and how it's managed in operational phase. Jan, I'd like to turn to you because listening to our panelists here from the US, there is a kind of a common theme about the readiness of the supply chain. Now, without trying to sound arrogant, I think in Europe, we've probably moved quicker, and certainly in the Nordics, where Jan comes from. Do you see the ability for your supply chain to provide, say, BIM-ready deliverables as not being as much a concern to what we've just heard?
In some way, yes. We think that, for instance, the design bureaus are pushing us for higher standards and raising the bar, and we feel that we have been breaking them or stopping them for actually doing the deliveries. The contractor on the other side has been a bit slow, but we see now that several of the contractors see this also as an opportunity, because what we have in our infrastructure area within the Nordics is that we have a lack of resources in general, both on the civil engineering, on the staff side and on the consultants, but also on the contractors. We are turning to contractors from all Europe to come to Sweden, but it's a fight between Norway, Sweden, and other countries also when the market goes up and the infrastructure projects are coming. So one of the issues is that we think that raising the technology will make us be less dependent of resources in the same way. We can work more efficient, and we can put higher standards or we can utilize the resources more. And I think that internally we have been quite strong in some projects during the last maybe 10 years with piloting projects without any drawings, and we have piloting also machine guiding and also these rebar robotics and other types of fully integrated BIM-based projects. But what we're doing now with this decision is now that we'll try to do it on the whole, all the projects within Trafikverket. So this is a different approach now, you could say.
Yeah, and well, it's actually good to hear that actually we're not running away from the US. We're actually more or less from a European perspective. Actually, the challenges are very similar. Yes, of course, some people are leading, but others are still have got a lot of catching up
Yeah.
to do.
I have one. I can say that we have a similar issue right now with the climate issue. We are now pushing for electrical trucks and electrical machinery and everything, or trying to optimize the use of how much CO2 we spend in the projects. It's the same thing here, that the contract say we cannot buy this machine if it's only one project, because it's quite expensive. So we also looking into maybe going over for leasing scenarios where we lease machines and supply give to the contractors. We also have bonuses and we have incentives that we're trying to make a quicker change than to wait until everybody has it has been changed automatically. But sometimes you have to push, and that will be a cost together with that. So we are discussing with Volvo, Scania, and everybody about this. So how can we get this technology in faster? I think this will be the same way with IFC, that we need to make it faster into implementation. Then we need, as an owner, to support that work.
Okay, well, I think you've given me an opportunity to change tack. I'm going to go back to Mike Kay, because again, I was really very impressed with the presentation you gave yesterday about the kind of vision. Jan's touched on something here, which is that actually these changes have potentially a long-term ROI, and we put big demands on the suppliers to change what they do, perhaps change the kit, as you mentioned. Are you really confident that if you can get these standards in place across the 50 states and beyond, that you can communicate the ROI both to your taxpayers who are going to fund this, but those people that supply you today? I mean, how are you going to tackle those issues?
Yes, in terms of would we be able to communicate that ROI? Yeah, I don't think there's any question about that. If that's, yeah, and I think it's really just the ability to, demonstrate both from the contractor's perspective, the return on investment, and the agency's return on investment, because we're both investing. We're investing in tools, we're investing in technology, and like Jan pointed out, we're asking the contractor to invest as well. And so I think once we get to a point where we've got open standards and we've got better communication and we've got less loss of data, and we can demonstrate the efficiency associated with that, yeah, I don't think there's any question we can demonstrate the return on investment.
And interestingly, I know I've had conversations with people yesterday, but I'm sure all of you have had these discussions over the years, that there's a real tension between the investment that gets done during the planning and capital investment phases. So, planning is when we got the best chance to change the design to make it constructible and also operable. So there's a question, and I'll pass it to George, about within your own organization, when you procure services now from your suppliers, are you recognizing the return on investment that you've got to make, or sorry, you want to realize from allowing maybe the design phase and the planning phase to be more costly, because you're going to have to use new tools, but you're going to have more opportunities to do optioneering analyses to hopefully make the construction more efficient. But the big return has got to be in operations, so you can reduce your asset costs. So could you kind of expand on that and how you're going to try to address it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really tough question to answer. And the reason I say that is because, we talk about BIM. And we talked about this a little bit beforehand, which is what is that definition? And I think there have been people at least with the United States, have said there's big BIM and little BIM. So big BIM might be digital twin, where as an organization, we've got a digital twin of our system. And little BIM might be just on a project. So I think that the way that we would communicate how those are going to be helpful is that we do have an investment as a DOT. But part of what happens is, let's go to the little BIM and pre-construction. In pre-construction, traditionally, we're making a paper plan set. And so if we have 5 contractors bid on a project, all 5 of them have to take that paper plan set and build their model independently. That's a lot of time. And so if the contractors are able to take a model and immediately open it up, that's a significant amount of cost that they can reduce in their bids. And so that's an ROI that's kind of hard to quantify until we get bids that show that we're getting significantly underneath the engineer's estimate each time that we go out. But then as you push that along, the other part of this is when you're out in the field and you've got paper, you've got a snapshot of what you're going to do. Whereas if you've got the entire modeled event that you can look at, it also makes things more efficient, and you likely are going to have fewer change orders, and we're seeing that as well. But again, those are really hard to make ROIs until you have that information in hand to show where you didn't have to make a change, and that's tough to see as well. But I think going to what both Mike and Mike have said is that in the overall, and this is probably the most challenging for ROI, is that when we have data that are available to everyone in the organization for all of the disciplines, and the software of their choice is able to take that information and do analysis, that's a huge efficiency that's really hard to make an ROI from. So one of the things that we do is we've got performance, and we say, put down some pavement. And if you do it exactly the way we say you should do it, then you will get 100% of your pay. And the pay goes down if it's not put in the way that we would expect it to be. There becomes a point in time where it's reject. But we also allow that to stay in place if the contractor makes an engineering justification of why it should stay in place. Well, we have a really hard time coming back and finding all the information and deciding, should we do that, should we not do that, or should we just keep going the way it is? If we've got that data right there, we can then analyze and say, oh, we should never do that. We should always replace it. Or, you know what, it lasted and it's okay, and we should change the way that we perform. But it's hard to do that right now. When we have that kind of efficiency, it's going to change the way we do business.
Yeah, I mean, it's that kind of, you're putting the cart before the horse a little bit here, because you want to sort of demonstrate the benefit before you've realized it, to be able to then re-realize it and keep re-realizing it.
Right.
And I know certainly in my work I've done both within Autodesk and previously, where I was trying to push companies like Atkins and Musho, who I worked for, to invest more in digital. The funny thing was that we have this kind of cost time quality paradigm where which one are we going to reduce to increase, or get a benefit in the other. I think moving to digital, what we can do is we can actually fix cost and time. So let's say they're not going to change, but the quality can go up, because as soon as you've got a benefit, you can keep building on that benefit. You can do more analyses. I've got a model. I can look at it from different perspectives. I can do quantity takeoff from it. So I'm reducing costs somewhere else. But what I might do is I might do 5 passes at the design. So I'll optimize the design. I'll get to the best fit. So I haven't actually reduced costs. I haven't said that actually your suppliers are going to do 20% work that they're used to because we can work 5 times faster. But what we are going to do is have better deliverables for hopefully operational phase.
I think that's a really good point, because for us, typically we're producing plans. So our effort goes into plan production and not necessarily model production. And so a lot of our designers, we have very tight timeframes for getting our designs out. They'll abandon the model and go to plan production and fix any errors that they may have in the model on the plans. It's not using an efficient modeling process doing that.
Yeah, it's like, constantly reinventing a square wheel, whereas, we
Right.
want to get a little bit rounder. Mike, I'll turn to you on something that Jan raised earlier about resources, because all this stuff sounds fantastic to me, because we're all we all want to go in the right direction. But is there the capacity in both within your own organization, but more importantly within the US, but the Montana supply chain to take on these new ways of working, and thoughts around that?
We've had a couple projects that we've led with the 3D model, and the challenge we're going to have in Montana, that obviously I'm much more familiar with, is readiness of the contracting community as a whole. And I don't know what that state is. I can tell you that they're not all ready, and I can tell you that some projects are higher likely candidates for a 3D model. But I think the larger ones are getting ready faster, and they're going to be, if they aren't already, and you're going to see some changes in that community really quick. once they start to see what's happening in the industry. But I think like just like internet connections in rural Montana, you're going to have small construction companies that may never be ready for that kind of a model, and we have to be sensitive to everybody, and large business, small business. So that's one of our biggest challenges is not only our internal people and the change affecting them, but the community that does all this work for us and ensuring they're capable and ready.
Yeah, I've heard that regularly, that kind of, as a public agency, you do have an obligation to the community that works with you. And yeah, of course, the larger businesses, they're going to step up because they want to win those big projects. They can attract the people, but you've still got the small designers, the small contractors, small suppliers. You can't leave them behind because the construction industry is basically founded on these small and medium enterprises. And we can't leave them behind. And I know from the UK where we've had our BIM mandate running really since 2011, but 2013, 14 is when we went live. All the work we've been doing is actually trying to bring the tail up with us, because by no means have we covered the entire supply chain and ecosystem. Could I turn back to you, Jan, because with Traffic Verkehr making their IFC statements, what are your kind of hopes about open BIM beyond what you've already articulated? Do you see, is it just going to be, well, we're going to get a bit more efficient with data, or do you think that you've got colleagues and a wider group within Traffic Verkehr that see this as this could be a game changer? Is it, how do you see this?
That's a hard question, because it's, of course, if we see for whole Traffic Verkehr, we will have different anticipations in different places, because some of them, as we talked yesterday about what is BIM and what are the expectations, in some areas they are very, very high. Some people think this will solve everything, but what I see is more of a fundamental change in how we build up our system and how we do communicate within the projects, and hopefully I think that it will be more efficient, but also more intelligent design and production, where we can move the information out to the people actually in the machines, and or the designer can have much more information when doing their part, so they can see much more what the other disciplines are working with, and other type of information on the data that they have on their desktop. So hopefully we will higher the information and more intelligence in all processes actually in this. But I think there are, we had one project where we did machine control in machine. We downloaded the model in the machines for the contractor, and they said one of the biggest benefits that person had, that he didn't have to wait for the contractor surveyor on the morning, because usually he went down to his machine 7 o'clock, and he was waiting for some data to actually start working. Now he can go directly, start working the minute he gets into the machine. He can start working directly. He doesn't have to be dependent on other work process internally. And he said that I can work from, I come to work to, I go to lunch, and all the full day. I don't have to stop and wait and to get information on that, and that I have everything I need in the machine to do the whole day, from the first minute I start. I think some of these benefits, we don't see them because we're not in the scenario sitting in the machine, but there are, I think, scenarios where there is a lot of benefits when we actually get there, that we will see further on.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard lots of stories about organizations where you might have field workers who normally have to go into the office or the depot, pick up their worksheet, pick up the van, get the bits in supply, drive to site, find they've got the wrong parts, go back out, find the right parts, actually wait 2 weeks to get the right parts. Whereas if they were able to go in the field, have all the information with them, then they wouldn't have to spend time driving backwards and forwards or whatever it might be. So yeah, there are kind of knock-on benefits that we don't see. I'd like to turn to Mike Kay again about the investment from AASHTO in bridge MVDs and IFC. I mean, in the room we've got Roger Grant. I know he did some work a few years back, and Christophe Castan, who's one of my eminent colleagues on the infrastructure room, who's really been driving the bridge agenda. I think there were some numbers coming out yesterday, how many bridges there are in the US, and now you have tens of thousands in a state of disrepair, to put it mildly. Is that like a big bang for the buck opportunity from this IFC?
It's hard to say at this point. And, when you talk about is it a big bang, for the buck, at this point, it's hard to say because we haven't had the level of commitment to be able to know that we're going to get that big bang for the buck. In terms of, there's been a lot of progress on the bridge side in terms of IFC adoption and use, but at the same time, that translates then to the ability to transfer information to the contractor electronically, and then for them to use that, during construction. And other than rebar fabrication, there really hasn't been a recognized, at least at this point, for a lot of our contractors, use in terms of the benefit of the model, and so it's a little bit harder to demonstrate that on that side. I think there are, a lot of benefits, but I think it's just going to take us time to get the industry ready, and using it, and I do want to, if I can go back for 1 second, when you were asking about, return on investment earlier, I think there's one difficulty in terms of return on investment that often gets overlooked, especially with state transportation agencies. One of the things that, when somebody asks me about return on investment, I tell them it's extremely difficult to calculate right now because I'm providing two products. I'm providing digital files, to contractors, and I'm providing paper plans. And so as long as I'm doing both, the ability for me to truly do a return on investment is difficult. When I get down to just one, or 1.5, which is the model, except for in cases where, we have contractors that aren't ready or projects that don't, require it. But, when you talk about return on investment, one of the difficult, problems that a lot of us are having is this transition is really about two things at the moment. Still doing digital files, but also doing paper plans.
Yeah, no, great. And I think that kind of just makes me think of how many of us have got Netflix, terrestrial TV, Amazon Prime. It's not like we're going to go down this new digital opportunity. We're still hanging on preciously to some of our old traditional forms, and that kind of covers, societal as also business areas. There's something else that you all said, and actually this point about bridges that I was trying to get to is, I think one of the other challenges we face, and this is perhaps the big problem, is that you've got 600,000 bridges or whatever it is in the US, of which 100,000 maybe need some resurvey because you just don't have the records.
Right.
And IFC offers us an opportunity to capture that in a survey for maintenance, because we don't have to, it's not about getting in and deciding whether it was pre-tension, post-tension, rebar, whatever. We just need to know what it looks like and where the defects might be. So if we can capture that in a model, we now have a model. Coming out of new capital projects, if you can lay down a demand for a model-based deliverable that you, as transportation owners, maintain during the operational phase, do you think there'll be a huge opportunity to also hand over that data when you have a remediation project or a modification, and say, I'm not paying you to resurvey, because that's what people do in our industry. The first kind of line item on the contract is, are we going to go and do a survey? And you go, no, I've got great records. So I don't know if anybody wants to sort of pick up on that point about, here's a huge opportunity that in operations you're holding great data that you can give to your suppliers.
Experience with that.
So I think it's a really interesting question because, again, we're going away from the little BIM or the project information and getting to an operations or an asset management situation. And with that, you're exactly right. We survey every project to begin with that we're going to model. Probably the biggest opportunity is underground utilities, because our as-builts are not as good as we would like them to be, and they're 2D. And so now if we have that opportunity to know from a data standpoint where our underground utilities are, instead of it being resurveying, now we're just going to validate where that stuff is. On the above ground, it's the same thing. If our as-builts are in a data form, then we may have to do control and things of that nature, but the survey is going to be a different animal altogether. But I think the fundamental problem, at least we're having at Utah DOT, is that we have to have the data architecture and the data governance to really maintain a digital twin. And if we do, then we have to have something like IFC or CGML or some kind of an open data standard that we can exchange with all of our vendors. So it's not just our pre-construction design. It's not just the contractor's design. It's all of our disciplines. They're all using a software, and everyone's going to need to be able to get into that digital twin and get that information. It's a huge challenge to get that set up so that we can actually move that data and have it into a central repository.
Okay, so that kind of sort of takes me to some, we've had some questions come in from the online audience, so which I think would be worth sort of raising. Mike, I'll ask you first. Are you willing to change the tools you're using if they can't handle IFC? You've mentioned that you're making a switch in some of the platform tools you're using. If you found that the whole tool set doesn't handle IFC, would you just say, all right, we're going to bite the bullet here?
Oh, I think it would depend on which tool. If it's something as pervasive as our design tools that is used by a large portion of the agency, that's obviously a very heavy lift to bring in. I would say no, but I would also say we're conscious of what open standards are coming, and that's part of our requirements for any new investment are going to be looking in that direction because we can see the writing on the wall. So I think it's a non-starter of a question because the point we're at today, we're not going backwards. Best way I would answer that.
No, great. I'm glad to hear that, and I'll pass the sort of a slightly different question. So the first one, that first one was from Jan Kalsnoy, and then I think I've got one from Jenna Ikonen. So Jan, do you see the biggest obstacle as slowness of software developers to embrace IFC, which hopefully I said that Autodesk is kind of, we're massively committed to, or, and this is maybe a more interesting question, the resistance to adapt to new working methods and technologies by both your own organization, but more importantly, the supply chain. Because, you know, here I'm trying to sell you a fantastic new way of working, and I've even got technologies to do it. Do you see lots of resistance out there?
Yes, absolutely. Because I think in our mindset, we are trying to do everything as fast, as quick, and as simple as possible when pushing for projects with project manager putting up their what do you call it, their vision on the goal. So everything that is an extra cost, it takes more time, and everything is always a resistance to get in. You have to push in changes and new methods and new way of working, everything. You have to force them in, otherwise they will not be there. But I think that mostly the resistance of the people working is I think that will be the biggest challenge, because even if the software is not 100%, even if it's 95%, we have issues. We can always solve them in a way. We don't need them to be perfect in every aspect. But the problem is with you have on the other side people working. If somebody in the whole chain says no, then it will be a problem. If we have a specialist in bridges that doesn't want to review the models, he wants paper on the table so he can do his checking. That will be stopped directly. We cannot. Otherwise, we need to change the specialist, or we need to change the way of working and everything around that. So I think that's a bigger issue, actually, to make sure that everybody is on board than actually having the software perfectly working.
Yeah, one of my old managers, he said some wise words to me about what we have to do is try to change the people, and if that doesn't work, then we have to change the people. And I think that's kind of where you're alluding. George, another question that's come in from Jay Poling, and it slightly touches on the resource issue. Have you found that the digital tools level of complexity has surpassed the ability of the suppliers to do it, and has that contributed to a labor shortage, you think? So this isn't what we're good at.
For us, it hasn't been.
No?
I don't think that the technology is the issue as far as our consultants or our prime contractors. I think that that's fine. But it's been baby steps bringing everyone along, because there are new tools and there is a different source of the data, for lack of a better use of words. Used to be the paper plan set. Everyone could read that, everyone could use it. That wasn't an issue. Now, all of a sudden, if you take that away, where is the source of the truth? Is it from the owner's software? Is it the contractor taking that and building it in their platform? There's a lot of questions, but I think where we're having the biggest challenge right now is our subcontractors. Our industry is booming right now. And so they come to the table and they're like, why do I need to learn a new thing on my phone or my iPad when I can go somewhere else and get the same kind of work? And so bringing along the industry, there's another challenge in there. And that is, if they bid on a project, they're likely not going to bid low. They're going to bid high, because they're going to have to learn a new tool and they don't want to do it. We've seen that on a couple of projects where we're getting bids that are way outside of what we would expect from the smaller subcontractors. And we've tried to go out, show them the tools, but sometimes they're not interested in it, because if it's a pipe guy, they just want to know how many feet, how many angles, and where do I dig the trench, and where do I lay it. They don't want to use a mobile device. But that's right now, and that's on us. We've got to show them how it's easier, why it's easier, and what tools they can use. And it sounds easy, but it's a struggle.
And you know, I think probably all of us realize that that's a death spiral strategy, because at some point someone else will enter the market that will adopt the tools and will be making productivity gains and will actually, you know, provide a lower bid because they can deliver the work in a lower way. And in some respects, that's an area that I'm very passionate about, is attracting new entrants into our industry space. Our industry, unfortunately, is perceived as very male-dominated, a bit aggressive, unpleasant working conditions. I think there's a term for the boys who can't at school rather than boys who can, and boys and girls who can. So, Mike, could you sort of expand on your view around, you're going to introduce new recommendations and requirements for the industry. Do you actually think that will have a positive benefit in raising the profile of the construction industry, but obviously for highways and so forth?
I do, you know, and I think it raises the profile because, you know, we're keeping up with technology and we're using new technology. And I think that, you know, begins to interest a younger generation. You know, one of the things that we've talked about is that a lot of the kids grow up gaming, you know, playing with 3D toys, 3D models all the time, you know, and when you can show them an industry that embraces that as a way of doing business, then all of a sudden, yeah, I think you do raise, you know, our industry's attractiveness, you know, to that next generation. And I do think at the same time, when you're embracing new technology, you're also convincing the public that you're investing their money wisely, you know, and I think that's really huge too. You know, and, you know, kind of like what, you know, we've talked about, you know, the contractors have embraced a lot of this, not simply because it's new technology, but because it's cost effective, you know, and so, you know, George talked about, you know, if we as transportation agencies don't embrace it, they'll go find somebody who does, and they'll do it, you know, and then they're going to charge us anyway, you know, and so it makes more sense for us to go ahead and embrace that technology, provide it, as opposed to not providing it and then having somebody go out and do it for them and then bill us back. And so I think there's a number of different benefits that help raise, you know, the awareness and, the appreciation for us taking on new technology.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of things in what you said there that you need the model-based working to enable, whether it's virtual reality views of site, simulations in the model environment. You can't do that off a 2D plan.
No.
And certainly in my experience, having spoken to many companies that have transitioned from a traditional 2D to a model-based working, the other thing that's happened is to an organization, they'll never go back. The company and the people say, this is much better. This is more fun. We can do more things. We can look at different opportunities. We can find different customers, because if my customer doesn't want to pay for it, I'll find somebody who will. So, I think hopefully as you get these standards out there, we haven't really talked about ISO 19650, which I'm really passionate about, from the kind of BIM planning side, but also IFC 4.3 and other open standards to lay a kind of a new baseline, because we're going to raise the game. I think it will unpack lots of opportunities. I'd like to open the floor to anyone in the room if they had a question as well. So I can ask a question, but then if anyone's got one, please raise your hand and come up and please, you can come up and use the mic.
I don't know that I have a question, but I do have a comment back to a question you asked about survey. Oh, yes. Alexa Mitchell with HDR. You asked a question about survey and resurveying things that the next time around a project comes. And I just wanted to make the comment that I think you will always need to resurvey things, but it will become more of a confirmation than a data collection exercise. So it will be more efficient, but the need to confirm that the existing conditions are exactly the way that we think they are, it's something that we can get away from in our industry.
Yeah, great point. I think it's about having confidence in the data that we hold that will allow us to, just as you say, confirm. And I think the other opportunities, as you introduce new systems, and maybe Mike, you can make a comment about this, that you'll be able to store new types of data, and that data might want enrichment because what you've got is old data. So is that something that you're thinking forward as well from a sort of CIO perspective?
Yeah, I think the short answer is yes, and exploring opportunities for more data analytics and data-driven decisions is where we're headed. I think right now it's a matter of understanding what data we do have, what the capabilities are, and having it in a format that can be consumed by other parts of the organization. So we've been talking quite a bit about it, but I don't have all the answers, but we certainly know that developing modern data warehouse and data analytic capabilities is front and center for our short-term plans.
But you need structured data to be able to make that commitment. So 2D plans ain't going to let you go there ever.
Correct. We're not even thinking about that or looking at it from that perspective. It's all a 3D BIM model.
Okay, we've got Roger Grant.
This is really interesting. On that point, Mike, I wanted to ask about one of the things I see in working with owners that are more in dealing with buildings is the efforts required to express the requirements from within their organization in a way that can then be met by a model that a contractor would create. And then once the modeling is done, receive the model and then bring that into your internal processes and use it. And I think there's a lot of data work that is being done inside those organizations to, create the source of truth for the way they handle all the types of components in an asset that you want to then maintain or whatever. I don't know how you guys are viewing that. It's interesting to me how you're viewing the work that you need to do inside your organizations to make use of models effectively to be able to set the requirements that you can check or use the data that comes in. Is that a consideration or programs you have to address that, something you're thinking about in making the models, useful, as well as having them exist?
I'll tell you the perspective from a CIO, and so the short answer again is yes. And really, when I look at our organization, like many DOTs, there's the planning, the design, the construction, the maintenance, the operations, and they're organizationally somewhat siloed. And historically, we've built their internal business systems around those same organizational silos. So that's when Jan talked about getting it from design to construction into an asset management system, we face the same challenge. But I think what this model is going to cause us to do is rethink not only how we develop projects, how we let contracts structure them, but how we're organized as a DOT, because the old model of design, construct, maintain is going to start to evolve, and we're all going to be sharing the same model. And that is going to give us much more agile capabilities as a project is managed from its life cycle, because you design it and you hand it to construction, and construction hands it to maintenance. But I think we're going to start to see a paradigm shift in how we manage our infrastructure in a digital world. It's going to change everything about how we operate. That's going to take some time, maybe not in my career, but my career at the DOT is probably shorter than others.
I mean, I think what you're raising there is there's an interesting thing about data ownership then. So, the language of I hand over data. So you now own that data, and as you modify it and you improve it, but then you hand it back to me, as opposed to I just want some deliverables. Actually, we're all using the same data pool and we enrich it. And there's a comment there about the discussion around data confidence and survey. Is there a case that resurvey could be avoided when there is sufficient asset owner confidence in their records that they will take legal liability for the data provided? I mean, I'd be happy for anyone to comment, but I actually think if we can set the baseline that we're going to capture good quality structured data, that's probably an aspirational position to go for, isn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, please.
No, not quick. I need one or no. I was interested by what you're saying, that the challenge is not about the technology. I am speaking at the moment as a representative of the supply chain in France, in terms of, and our position today is to say that we need to have the authority, national authority or authority to pull the issue for one reason, that's a big challenge, big difference between the discussion of CAD and BIM now, because we can, I mean, I was involved in CAD since 30 years, so so the challenge is changing. It's not around technology, it's around what you said, that we need data to save the planet and to make the planet safe. And that's the reason we say that as a supply chain, we are ready to move on. We have produced ISO and 1950, IFC and so on, but we need to have all of the people around the table, supply chain and you, pulling the issue that we need to have the solution, and there is no other solution without data management and so on. So the point is we have quite the technology, but we need to find the issue how to manage the data on long term, what you are saying about the digital twin. That, I think, the key problem we have, but we need to move very fast about that and commonly. That is, it's not only a question, it's a question, are you ready to that? And we say that because in France, we are seeing that the national authority is a little bit late about that, according to where we are as a supply chain. Even if the supply chain, we have two parts, part of the supply chain very ready, another one part not so ready, but in terms of technology to be able to manage, we are ready for that. So that's the point for me. How we are going to proceed for managing the data needed, the data management needed to make the planet safe.
So if I understood correctly, I think part of the challenge right now is in the United States, You've seen the screen with the states that are moving in the direction, the states that are making the model a legal document. It's still a small fraction of the states. That's what the fundamental focus is right now, is how to move that information from design to construction. But if we start talking about digital twin, I think the other fundamental issue is going to be, we really need to have an element schema for every single one of our features on the system. And there's 50 states. So unless we do it as AASHTO or as an organization, a state like Utah may go out and make those definitions and then have to go back and start over because the national standard may be different. We're still going to continue on, but that is a risk that we take. The other part of this is we also have to decide what our tolerance is for where we put things. So put a stop sign somewhere. You say the design says it's exactly here, but we know out in construction there's some difference where it is. We have to decide what we're willing to live with. Is it 6 inches? Is it a foot? Is it a yard? And we have to do that for every single one of our features as well. Those are huge, heavy lifts that take time. So I think to answer the question, when we get there, we feel like it's going to be reasonably easy then to exchange data from our digital twin to any vendor that we're talking about. But we want to be the owner of that digital twin. So if it's a consultant who is doing some design in all plan, we want them to publish it to the digital twin. Then a contractor using ag tech can go into the digital twin, pull the information out and use it. But putting that together is still a huge challenge for us.
Yeah, and I think in some respects it's like you've got to get your house in order first. But Christoph did highlight that there are bigger considerations that actually this work will feed up to, but you've still got to do that groundwork. And just in terms of a minor response to what you've just said there, George, I mean, the work that we've done, we're in IFC 4.3 over the last 5 or so years has actually been to try and get some consensus around what things are. You know, what's a good example of a crash barrier or a overhead electrification gantry, or just a number of things.
Yeah, and that's the exciting part about it. Seeing this getting close to where we can have that exchange is awesome.
Yeah, we had another question from the audience.
Yes, I am Francois Valois from Bentley Systems. So I'm VP of Civil Engineering, so I lead the R&D team at Bentley Systems. And I have a sort of funny question for you guys. Because I'm going to build my roadmap based on your answer, when can we stop producing software to produce plans? When can we stop when I can go in my open roads roadmap and say, I'm not going to invest a single dollar in developing plan production capabilities? And essentially when do you think model-based delivery will have a state, a map of the US and Canada and say every single provinces will be, would there be a day like that? Or is that going to be like?
If it's okay, I'll start with that. I think the answer is it's here now, but part of the challenge is that there isn't an open standard that we can use. So I think someday there's going to be in pre-construction where you have someone sitting at the table that may be using Bentley tools, someone sitting at the table that may be using Autodesk tools, someone may be using Esri, someone may be using Trimble, but they have to have one source of the truth to do that. So right now, the tools that we're using, we haven't found one that's perfect. So we have to use a combination of tools in pre-construction to do review. We have to use a combination of tools in construction to do the inspections. It's a struggle until we get to an open data standard that anyone can use. And then at that point, tools should become much more usable as well.
Yeah.
Best guess, no more plans.
How
many years?
We're doing it now, but we don't for every company. For not for all of them right now, but I would say within the next 5 years we will manage that.
I would say that you could actually stop developing it because we will not go further on that road. We will be where we are today with drawings and how to produce drawings and how to generate information on the drawings and so on. You could put that people on the other side, on the model developing, and make them show us the same information visually in models. Where we have reviewing models, for instance, we have to go to every little object to get the information on that, where we actually would rather see it as a drawing, that you can have flags and you can have information, you can have colors, you can have other things in the model that make it reviewable. You can develop that plan visualization technology in the models instead, because we will need to be able to see the models in different aspects. So even in the future, we cannot have a stripped down model with all the information hidden when we do reviewing or we're doing overviews and so on. So I think there is still a need of visualizing things, but we should leave the 2D drawing, but move that way to the model world, where we can visualize things in the same way, but with the new technology.
And how many years do you think without no plans?
No plans. I would say we have, maybe 5 years, maybe. I think we are producing products without plans today, but until we have it on the whole, yeah. The long tail will probably take a while.
And really, what's interesting there is that, you know, from different sides of the pond, we've had a similar kind of timeline, 5 years, and that's actually I think that's quite realistic if you can get your house in order.
Yeah, can I add a follow-up to that?
And
I think the answer to that lies in we've got a huge disparity in guys like me that are old salties, codgers, that they don't want to look at a mobile device or a phone. And then you've got guys coming out of college or girls coming out of college, and all they're using is their phone. And until we get to a point where whoever it is can open up that tool and it's easier and faster than using plans, it makes it a challenge. So what we've seen with a lot of our projects is someone who wants to look at plans, they get stuck with using a mobile device. And they say, just give me the plans so I can do my work. But they've got that person next to them that's using a phone, and they said, oh, I've already moved past that, it's easy. And they go, oh, well, why don't you show me? And then when they can be shown how to use it, they understand it's an easier way to use it and it's quicker, but the tools have to be user-friendly enough that someone can just pick it up and use it. And right now, they're not.
Yeah, Mike, I think you wanted to add.
You know, to be honest with you, I think that's a hard question to answer. You know, in terms of, can we get to a point where for those projects that require or utilize a model, you know, how long will it take states to do that, you know, across the board? And I would say 5 to 10 years. But I think the thing that we have to recognize is that most state agencies, you know, only construct models on maybe 10 to 15% of the projects that they let. So you still have to determine what's going to happen with that other, you know, 90 to 85% of the projects. Are there going to be, you know, some kind of compromise between paper and digital? But for those projects, what do we do? You know, because they're not worthy of a model because they're only rehabilitation projects, you know, but, you know, for those, how do we get the same benefit, you know, and that we get, you know, from a model-based project from those in terms of data collection at the time of construction? I think that's the real question, because that's really what you want.
I mean, I think George might have touched on perhaps the answer, which is those digital natives, people that have grown up with the internet, mobile technology. Actually, they'll not want to deliver even those small projects in an old school way, because they'll say, well, I can actually use new tools. I can do a photogrammetric survey. I can create a model. I can work off of that model. So, you know, maybe there is a paradigm shift that's going to take place, but it's actually a generational shift that, you know, actually the old way.
5 to 10 to get rid of that generation.
Yeah, we all need to retire, I guess, is the issue. Yeah. I'd like to ask just a couple more questions, and actually this is really an open question to all of you, because we've only got sort of just less than 10 minutes left. And I'll start with you, Mike, since you've got the mic. You know, are there any comments you'd like to make in terms of the discussion we've had, and like I won't say necessarily a closing statement, but just a thought about what does this mean? You know, what's your kind of vision of where this is going to take us?
You know, one of the things that you touched on that I thought was really good was that all of a sudden, when you start to utilize these tools, you open up new customers and new uses. You know, and I think one of the things that we overlook is just how many new options there are once you start to be able to create these models and create these files. And, you know, one of the things that we're looking at in Iowa is pushing driver education out to the parents, you know, moving it away from schools and out to the parents. Remember that, George. You know, and one of the things that our director, you know, for the motor vehicle asked me was, could we produce, you know, simulations that would help them in driver ed? You know, videos that we could produce to help them learn how to drive things like a roundabout, you know, and, you know, because she saw what we could do. You know, and one of the things that we did just for kicks and giggles was we took an accident scene and we took our survey crew out there and we had them LiDAR, you know, the accident scene. Because one of the things right now that's really big nationally is quick clear. When an accident occurs, get it off the road as fast as possible. And so one of the things that we wanted to demonstrate was that if you use LiDAR, you can go out there and scan that thing in 15 minutes and everybody can go. And so what we did then was we reconstructed, you know, a virtual reality of that accident scene. You know, it was funny because our former director was a member of the Attorney General's staff. And he said, Mike, do you know how much, you know, attorneys would drool if they knew you could do this? You know, and so I think one of the things that, you know, sometimes gets missed is there are 1,000 uses that we still haven't discovered in terms of what we're doing.
Just on that very point, a former colleague of mine who now works for Unity, he literally took a drone to an English police service and did that exact example to them. And they said, you know, you could just have a drone in the back of your van, your vehicle and survey it. But process got in the way. That's not how we do it. And, you know, it's like, and all we have is long queues waiting for the accident to be cleared. George.
So let's face it, in a world of engineers, we don't like change. If we got plans, we've used it, it works, why would we do something different? And so we see a lot of resistance from the standpoint of, if we're going to do it programmatically and flip the switch and we're done tomorrow, people have questions, and they're good questions. They're questions that haven't been solved yet. But I think moving in this direction of open data standards and having the ability to publish, I think that it's going to reduce the number of questions. It's going to make it a lot easier to know where the source of the truth is. It's going to make it a lot easier for everyone to understand how to get to what they want to use. And I think that the anxiety that people may have, it's not that big a deal if you start small enough. And once we get open data standards, I think it's going to make it so that you may be able to flip that switch programmatically and do it a lot quicker.
Yeah, no, great point. You know, reducing data silos to actually bring stuff together, things can unpack. Mike.
I touched on it a little bit, and sort of these folks, I think unleashing innovation and the workforce of the future is going to be central to what we're doing. And I think where we're headed, as I said before, is a paradigm shift with how we do business. And I can't predict exactly what it looks like, but everything from how we structure and let contracts to how we look at a project from a customer perspective, customer meaning the traveling public. And I think about how fast we've delivered a couple projects with a digital model. And when we start just thinking openly about how to serve the customer better and produce a better product quicker, more cost effectively, this is going to change how we do every aspect of our work at a DOT.
Fantastic. Jan, we started with you. You get the last word.
I just agree with everybody. But I think also that it's very hard to see the future with this implemented in all aspects, because it's I think it's a lot of benefits that is not clear for us right now, but that will be there when we get there, because like the engineer, don't fix it if it ain't broken. So, but this one, I think we need to convince that it's not broken. It's just we need to open new doors so we can take the next step in digitization, automation, and productivity in both the design and the construction phase. And I also think that if we can open this market for innovation, new players will come into this market to see, okay, this is interesting. Now I can take my drone solution or something else, come from the game industry, or come into this market to see, okay, this is something that is interesting to develop new solutions or develop ideas and come on with automation or something like that. They come from other businesses to see that we are interested in their innovation and their technology in our business. If we stick to drawings, they will never come up over to our side to see, okay, we have a robot here. Do you want to use it in your projects? Okay, we have the drawings here. They will never, it's a too big threshold to actually get into our market. But if we can say, this is the model, can you produce this with your robot? I think there will be an opening to the market to new innovations and new technology. So I think that's what I see in the future, that open BIM is also a way of open the whole infrastructure market for innovation.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's a bit of a no-brainer. In a world of constant change, the only thing we can guarantee is change, and we need to embrace that change. So, thank you very much. Thank you. I'd like to firstly thank our fantastic panelists, Mike, George, Mike, and Jan, for your great insight, informed conversation. I hope it's been inspirational to everyone. I certainly learned a lot. Thank you for the people here in the room, in the audience, and also thank you for those of you online who paid attention, provided questions, and I hope you all found this a really interesting session to attend. And I'll let you go for your lunch. Thank you very much.